Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Power Parsha Pearls. In our portion this week, we are introduced to our patriarch Abraham. And inasmuch as he is the founding father of Judaism, he actually, you might say, doesn't fit any conventional image of a hero. He's not like Noah, whom we've talked about previously, the sole survivor of a world hastening to its destruction. He's not like Moses, a lawgiver and a liberator of the Jewish people. He's not like the later prophets, a man who spends his life confronting kings, wrestling with his contemporaries, and speaking truth to power. To be sure, Abraham is a man of exemplary virtue. He welcomes strangers. He gives them food. We read about how he fights a battle on behalf of several nations in order to rescue his nephew Lot. He prays for them in one of the greatest dialogues in religious literature. He has an open home for all wayfarers. But if we were asked to categorize Abraham with adjectives, the words that spring to mind would be kind, gracious, mindful, but not necessarily hero. So, what is it that makes Abraham stand out? What is the defining moment that makes him worthy of the accolade of patriarch of the Jewish people? Why indeed is he the founding father of Judaism? Let's consider the following cryptic parable that is offered by the Medrash. It's a very telling and especially pertinent parable, particularly in our day and age. God said to Abraham, "Go from your land, your birthplace, and your father's home." Those are the opening words of our portion. Says the Medrash, to what may this be compared? To a man who is traveling from place to place. When he confronts a palace and he observes on closer look how the palace is in flames. And he wonders, is it possible that the palace has no owner to extinguish the flames? The owner of the palace looks out from the palace and said, "I am the owner of the palace." Similarly, says the Medrash, Abraham, our father, looked out at a world burning with immorality, engulfed in the flames of corruption. And he called out and he said, "Is it possible that the world lacks a ruler? It's burning. No one's doing anything about it." God looked out and said to him, "I am the ruler, sovereign of the universe." What we need to understand is the owner of the palace's reply. What is God's reply to Abraham? "I am the owner of the palace. I am ruler, sovereign of the universe." Note how the owner of the palace does not make an attempt to get out of the burning building. He does not make an attempt to extinguish the flames. He's merely stating that he's the owner of the palace, that palace that is going up in smoke. It is as if, instead of racing out, the owner is calling out for help. God made the palace. Man set it on fire, and only man is charged with the task of putting out the flames. Abraham asks God, "Where are you?" God replies, "I am here. Where are you?" Man asks God, "Why did you abandon the world?" God asks man, "Why did you abandon me?" And thus began the revolution of Judaism. Abraham's encounter with God in the presence of a burning palace gave birth to the mission statement of Judaism, and that is humanity's courageous venture to extinguish the flames of immorality and bloodshed and restore the world to the harmonious and sacred palace it was always intended to be. And when Abraham set upon that mission, it was precisely that encounter that had launched him onto his mission of bringing godliness, bringing God to the awareness of humanity, and thus setting him up as the ultimate patriarch from which we all can learn and we must all follow. So by definition, to be a child of Abraham is to have the courage to be different, to challenge the idols of the age, whatever those idols might be, and whichever the age we might find ourselves in. In an era of polytheism that meant seeing the universe as the product of a single creative will, and therefore not meaningless, but coherent and meaningful. In an era of slavery, it meant refusing to accept the status quo in the name of God, but instead challenging it in the name of God. When power was worshipped, it meant constructing a society that cared for the powerless, for the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. During centuries in which the mass of mankind was sunk in ignorance, it meant honoring education as the key to human dignity and creating schools to provide universal literacy. When war was the test of manhood, it meant striving for peace. In ages of radical individualism, it meant knowing that we are not what we own, but what we share. Not by what we buy, but by what we give. That there is something that is greater, that is higher, that is more meaningful than appetite and desire. Namely, the call that comes to us as it came to Abraham from outside ourselves, summoning us to make a contribution to the world. And let's face it, the world is every bit on fire today as it was in the days of Abraham. But make no mistake about it, to be sure, the owner of the palace is not abandoning his world. He's just calling out to you, to me, that we step out to put out the flames. So if we forget the conversation between Abraham and God 3,800 years ago, we're failing to do our part in the protection of the palace that is on fire at risk of destruction. And to be honest, again, for too long, many Jews have succumbed to the lure of the modern popular notion that there's no such thing as absolute evil behavior. Thou shalt not judge has become the cherished motto of our times. We've been taught to rather understand the underlying frustrations compelling the aggressor to follow his or her extreme route. Have we lost sight of our mission statement, crafted by Abraham and God on that fateful day in the face of that burning palace thousands of years ago? Jews, wrote the non-Jewish journalist Andrew Marr, really have been different. They have enriched the world and they have challenged it. And it is precisely that courage to travel alone if necessary, to be different when required, to swim against the tide when absolutely incumbent, to speak in an age of relativism of the absolutes of human dignity under the sovereignty of God. It all began with Abraham, daring to stand apart. With his decision, he created a world of possibility. He created a cosmos of destiny. And today, some 4,000 years later, to be a Jew is exactly the same calling, to be willing to hear the still, small voice of eternity, urging us to travel, to move, to go on ahead, continuing Abraham's journey toward that unknown destination at the far horizon of hope. Now, Abraham was presented with not one, but 10 different tests, real life-changing challenges. One we read about at the beginning of this week's portion. It was the first test, when he was instructed to up sticks and abandon his past, to leave everything behind and simply travel to some unknown destination because God said so. The final test is per the end of next week's portion, when he's instructed to take his son as a sacrifice, as per the famous story of the Akedah, to bring his son up the mountain and sacrifice him there. What is interesting to observe is the identical parallel language in both. Lech, Lecha. Our portion is so called because it begins with God saying to Abraham, Lech, Lecha, me'artzecha, go from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's home to the land which I will show you. In next week's portion, God instructs that Abraham take his son and Lech, Lecha, El Eretz Moriah, again, go to the mountain which I will show you. Lech means to go. Lecha means to you. What does it mean, go to you? Addressed to Abraham when instructed to leave his father's home, addressed to Abraham when instructed to bring his son up the mountain. On a simple level, it means go for your own sake. Do this because ultimately you'll stand to benefit from the experience. But on an altogether different level, God isn't merely challenging Abraham to go to these places, to rise to these challenges. He's also giving him the secret of how to do so. Don't just go, but Lech Lecha, go to you. Go to you is an invitation to Abraham and indeed to the rest of us to go on a journey of self-discovery. You cannot rise to the challenges of life if you don't know what you're truly made of. So before anything else, God says to Abraham, go to you, self-actualize, find yourself. How do we really know who we are? Why do we do the things we do? Why do we make the decisions we make? Well, as children, our choices are made for us, and our specific circumstances and surroundings often determine how our lives are lived. As we grow older and we gain more independence, we're given more responsibility, and we have more say in different matters. Eventually, we are on our own and we determine how we live. But there's always still the question as to how we come to the choices that we arrive at. You see, if we continue to follow the patterns of our upbringing, then we're really just choosing this for ourselves. Or maybe not. Maybe we're doing this because it's what we know. It's how we were raised. It's what we're comfortable with. On the other hand, if we rebel against our upbringing and we do the exact opposite, then the question still remains. Are we making a conscious choice, or are we merely looking to do just not do the things the way that we were taught? So the first instruction to Abraham is go to you. Go in yourself. Discover who you are. Never mind your upbringing, which you might just follow or might just reject. Determine who you are so that when you come out, you'll emerge knowing your true self, your unique strengths, as well as your areas of vulnerability, and therefore be better able to make your choices that will help you be a better person all around. Sometimes that means that you have to literally force yourself out of your comfort zone to get unstuck. I remember some years ago, I led this large group of young singles on a birthright trip in Israel, Taglit, summer of 2006. Amongst them was an Irish contingent, and there was one really big guy in the group, you know, the macho man who makes the most noise. So on day one of that trip, in a war that was going on in the north, we were confined to our hotel, which resulted in this whole bunch of Irish singles having a drinking contest in front of everybody else that was there. And I walked right into the middle of it, and he pointed to me as the rabbi and leader of the group, and he challenged me. So there was me with a full cup of whiskey in my hand and some 60, 70 young singles screaming, down in one, down in one. I did my bit, and then he followed suit with them cheering him on as well. You'd think that was it. I've established my credibility. I'm good to go. 75 singles. Do it again. Do it again. And so deep breath, I did. He couldn't. Score one for the rabbi. Totally deflated ego. 10 days later, we're standing at the top of a cliff getting ready for abseiling. Wouldn't you know it? The two with the greatest fear of heights are me and my Irish friend. Once again, you've got everybody already at the bottom of the cliff having made it, cheering us on. He muttered some explicative about not wanting to lose to the rabbi again, and down he went. I wasn't about to lose my crown, and well, that's how I overcame my fear of heights. Sometimes you'll be surprised how overcoming one fear can give you the confidence to confront other things you might otherwise be afraid of in life. And so the divine instruction to Abraham, Lech, Lecha, go to you, whether at the opening of our portion to leave everything behind or later to take a son up the mountain, it teaches us how to wrestle through the difficult parts of life to get to the good stuff. The key is get in touch with yourself. Wherever you are at in your life, let go of the negatives. Take a leap of faith. It might be just what you need to shake things up. And it will certainly give you a much better picture of who you really are and how to really achieve lasting and meaningful success in life. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.